Story 1. If you are a police officer, you have to tell me. No, they do not. Story 2. Receiving a raise that places you into a higher tax bracket means you lose money overall. Story 3. One common claim is that people swallow 7 spiders a year in their sleep. Why did anyone ever believe that? Story 4. You have to wait 24 hours before reporting a missing person to the police. Story 5. When you shave your hair, it does not grow back thicker or with more hair. Story 6. The blood inside your body is blue until it hits outside air. Oxygen turns it red. I hear adults talk about this and ask me if it's true fairly regularly. Story 7. I used to work in an anatomy museum, and the number of people who actually think men have one fewer rib is beyond troubling. Story 8. Detox diets are supported by normal liver and kidney function. Also, marketing of superfoods is misleading. Story 9. Bats eat thousands of mosquitoes each night. Mosquitoes do not provide enough energy to make up for the effort involved in catching them. Bats prefer larger insects and only eat mosquitoes if no other food source is available. Story 10. A mother bird will reject her chick if you touch it. Story 11. Hair and fingernails do not continue to grow after death. What actually happens is the skin recedes, making more hair and nails visible. Story 12. The human brain does not stop developing until 25 years old. The study that this fact is based on examined changes in brain structures in people up to 25 years old. It does not say the brain develops until 25 then stops. It says the brain continues to develop, up to the maximum age included in their study. This does not mean you are not a real adult until 25, but rather even until 25 and likely far longer. Parts of your brain that govern major aspects of your personality and behavior continue to grow and change. The truth is that there is no specific age that marks the difference between adolescence and adulthood based on neuroscience. Any hard line between those stages is always arbitrary and incomplete. Dividing human aging into distinct stages requires such arbitrary divisions and can be to some degree misleading and counterfactual. I could have sworn there was a specific study at the heart of this, but after a brief search, I cannot find it. Some articles explain that the age of 25 basically originated without a solid basis and is just a popular factoid. Another paper reference states that prefrontal cortex development is complete by 25. However, the citations for this claim do not clearly support it. For example, one cited study examined people aged 10 to 24. Other studies potentially supporting this statement are not directly cited when the claim is made. These are functional magnetic resonance imaging studies comparing children, adolescents, and adults, defining children as 7 to 11 years old, adolescents as 13 to 17 years old, and adults as 23 to 29 years old. Further reading is needed to clarify this, but extensive review of scientific articles can be time-consuming and challenging. Story 13. Napoleon was not short. He was above average height for men in his time. This idea was mostly spread by the British as satire or propaganda. Story 14. My son's opinion is that they do not truly believe it. They just like to argue. Story 15. 50% of marriages, which most people interpret as the rate at which people simply divorce, is misleading. When accounting for the small percentage of individuals who divorce 2, 3, or 4 times, the actual rate is closer to 30% of marriages. A similar issue occurs with runaway statistics, where the same subset of foster children affects the numbers, as well as with sexual offender recidivism rates. Story 16. Everyone thought the Earth was flat and considered Columbus crazy for believing it was round. However, it was widely understood at the time that the Earth was round. The reason no one funded his trip was that his calculations were incorrect. He thought the circumference was much smaller than it actually is. Story 17. Many people believe that a baby can leach calcium from their mother's teeth while in the womb. This is not possible because the calcium in teeth is not accessible to the body like the calcium in bones. It is common for pregnant women to develop cavities, but this is largely attributed to changes in lifestyle and routines. An interesting study showed that women who adopted infants had similarly elevated levels of tooth decay as women who gave birth. Story 18. The litter boxes in schools story. In the last 2 weeks, I have had to tell two separate people from different areas of my life that it is completely false. I do not understand why people think that schools have enough money to buy litter boxes for children. We barely have enough money for adequate staff and have been told that janitors are a luxury. The only kitty litter in our schools is for lockdowns when a student has to use the emergency bucket so they do not get hurt running to the actual bathroom. Story 19. I before E except after C. There are more exceptions to the rule than words that follow the rule. Story 20. Carrots help you see in the dark rather than it being World War II propaganda. Story 21. Your body burns more calories eating celery than the celery contains. Story 22. Personality types exist even though they have no scientific basis. Personalities are dynamic and depend on context, especially regarding interactions with others. Many people also believe that individuals are inherently introverted or extroverted and cannot change that. Story 23. Dolphins are the only animals other than humans that have sex for fun. It is very silly. To clarify, since people seem to be missing context, I believe it is incorrect and silly to think that dolphins and humans are the only animals to have sex for pleasure. I am more inclined to believe most animals have sex for pleasure, and if we are not able to observe or prove this, it is probably due to a lack of our understanding of animal psychology. Story 24. Playing on my phone while I wait for the gas pump to fill up my tank will somehow cause an explosion. Story 25. There is no evidence that blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, is the actual origin of blood is thicker than water. This claim was made in the 1990s by a couple of authors with no source to support it. Blood is thicker than water is simply a proverb about familial bonds being stronger than platonic ones. Story 26. I blame television for this, but there is no such thing as a virginity test. Some women are born without hymens, some never break, and some break from activities like jumping. Also, the alpha male wolf is not real. The researcher who first theorized that later realized he was actually observing family units. So the alphas were just parents. Story 27. Easily the jet fuel cannot melt steel beams claim. The Twin Towers were built with a structure mainly supported by the internal column that held the elevators. They were slammed into by a plane going full speed, which damaged that internal column and knocked it off balance. At that point, it was only a matter of time until the buildings collapsed due to no longer having sufficient load-bearing capability to support themselves. Steel beams cannot be melted by jet fuel, but they can get bent, sheared, cracked, and warped by a massive impact like that. As for other buildings that seemingly collapsed before the towers went down, I have no idea on that one. The only thing I can think of would be debris from the towers hitting the other buildings. A section of the plane falling out and hitting a building several dozen stories down could do it, but I have not heard much confirmation on that. Story 28. It has improved, but the McDonald's coffee lawsuit comes to mind. It became the poster child of a subversive public relations campaign to shift public opinion against people suing large companies for frivolous lawsuits. However, when you actually listen to the details of the case, you realize how justified the lawsuit was. Story 29. Defibrillator paddles or an automated external defibrillator can restart a stopped heart. I blame Hollywood. Story 30. People in the Middle Ages would be lucky to live past 35. Story 31. 1 in 200 people is a descendant of Genghis Khan. We do not know if it was him, since we do not have his DNA. The timeline does not match because the common ancestor lived over 2,000 years ago instead of 800 years ago. We know where he sent his troops and it does not match. Story 32. Men are 6 times more likely to leave a sick partner than women are. The study that claimed this was retracted because the researchers accidentally counted deaths along with breakups, but only in couples where the woman was sick. The paper was retracted and the retraction is available online, yet hundreds of articles that cited the paper were never updated and are still frequently posted on Reddit in communities such as You Should Know and Mildly Interesting. Story 33. Circumcision does not prevent human immunodeficiency virus infection, nor does it have significant health benefits. Story 34. People keep talking about climate change as if it is up for debate. There is no believing or not believing in climate change. It is happening, and the people who so doubt about it have a political agenda. Story 35. Turning on the overhead light in the car while driving is illegal. It used to scare me as a child. Story 36. Trickle-down economics is an economic theory that has never worked in practice. The United States has based its entire tax system on this disproven theory, even though it has never actually been effective. Story 37. That freedom of speech, as protected in the First Amendment, means you can say whatever you want without consequences. Story 38. The idea that eating fat makes you fat is incorrect. As a coach, this irritates me every day, along with many other myths that are not true. Story 39. Schools are providing litter boxes for furry fans. I know someone who saw it happen. Story 40. That mothers give birth and then decide to end the baby's life after birth, known as post-birth abortions. That mothers decide at 7, 8, or 9 months to have a pregnancy terminated simply because or for fun. Story 41. The concept of alpha male refers to a wolf pack's hierarchy, which does not occur naturally in the wild. However, many men use this idea to justify being aggressive and rude. Story 42. The original quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." No, it is not. That was added centuries later, around the 1990s. Story 43. The claim that vaccines cause autism is false and continues to be incorrectly spread. Story 44. Over 50% of marriages end in divorce. These statistics account for all marriages of all time, including one man who divorced 8 women and will likely divorce another 3. Divorce statistics for first-time marriages are closer to 30%. Story 45. Dominance theory with dogs was debunked by the person who originally created it. It has been proven false multiple times, yet people still use it frequently. Story 46. That Jews are the puppet masters in control of major institutions such as media, Hollywood, global markets, central banks, monetary policy, or the world. Story 47. Vaccines do not cause autism. Jenny McCarthy helped spread this misinformation. The source she cited has acknowledged that he was wrong, but this correction is often ignored. Once misinformation spreads, it is difficult to undo the impact. Story 48. Your brain is still developing until about 23 years old. The study only included participants up to 23 years old. It is likely the brain continues to develop for much longer. Story 49. Sugar makes you hyper. Especially with kids, they are more likely to have sugar at events like birthday parties, where the environment makes you more hyper. Turkey also does not make you tired. We tend to eat turkey at Thanksgiving and Christmas when we are with lots of people in large gatherings. Often, it is more the holiday that makes us tired, not the turkey. Story 50. There is no scientific evidence that vaccines cause autism. Sexual orientation is not caused by childhood sexual abuse. Story 51. The Kitty Genovese bystander effect. Kitty Genovese was raped and murdered, but the story that 38 witnesses failed to act was entirely made up by a reporter. The story was never challenged for 50 years. Story 52. This idea is more common in the history community. That the reason behind Russia's chronic history and present of authoritarianism and militarism is the Mongol invasion and rule. This video explains why it is not accurate. Story 53. There is a lot of different disinformation, but the Irish potato famine was not caused by an inability to grow crops due to a microbe or any other factor. They were able to grow plenty of crops for the entire country. However, the crops were deliberately withheld as part of a genocide through starvation and eviction. Story 54. Starvation mode is the concept that eating below a certain number of calories causes weight gain. How would starving to death be possible if that were true? Story 55. Waiting 20 minutes after eating before swimming is a myth that originates from superstitions in the Middle Ages and is not actually related to swimming but to bathing. Story 56. Consuming cholesterol increases your cholesterol levels. Story 57. Dyslexia is a vision problem. I remember kids having special glasses for this when I was in school. Now, 30 years later, we have 30 years of research, including functional magnetic resonance imaging, to literally look inside the brain to see what happens when we attain literacy, countless meta-analyses, and a larger corpus of research than nearly any other educational field. Still, every single week I am debunking this myth with teachers and parents. To address the question, well, what is it then? I will simplify to keep it brief. In our current understanding, dyslexia falls under the diagnostic label of a specific learning impairment. People with this diagnosis often have difficulty perceiving and manipulating the individual sounds, phonemes, in spoken language and matching those to graphemes or letters. The treatment is a higher dose of the same systematic synthetic phonics instruction that helps all students attain literacy, including a focus on phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. In fact, some researchers in the field of literacy do not consider dyslexia a useful diagnostic term today because many people with reading and writing difficulties previously termed dyslexia respond to systematic synthetic phonics instruction delivered with fidelity and at the right dose when there is no concurrent language disorder. This field stirs a lot of emotions and people have opinions, but ultimately, we have to follow the research and accept that understandings change over time. That is a feature, not a flaw of science. Story 58. I know for a fact that a certain person did not write in his autobiography about inappropriate behavior with his couch. However, I still spread the story. It seems plausible enough that it could be true, even if he did not technically write about it. Story 59. That there is anything more to weight gain or loss than the amount of food you eat. Eat many foods, get big, get fat. Eat fewer foods, get skinny. Eat too few foods, get so skinny you die. That is the entire spectrum. Do some people retain water? Do some people bloat? Do some people have a fast metabolism? Yes, of course, but eat less food and you lose weight, eat more and you gain weight. Story 60. Your brain finishes developing when you are 25 years old. That is not what the study found. Now, this false fact is being used to restrict people's rights. Story 61. Moon phases or zodiac sign related information, such as birth rate and similar topics. Story 62. The United States Postal Service was mismanaged during an economic downturn. In fact, they were required to front-load their pensions to make Federal Express and United Parcel Service appear more competitive. Story 63. Owing to exponential population growth, there are more people alive today than all the people in history who have died. This is incorrect. Historical population growth rate is only 0.8%. That is not nearly fast enough to make that statement true. In history, 117 billion people have been born. Today, the world population is 8 billion. Story 64. That daddy longlegs, also known as harvestmen, are not venomous, and their small fangs cannot envenomate people. Story 65. That someone is not doing their job for money. Yes, it is great to have other reasons, but how do you all think jobs work? Story 66. There are many exoplanet myths that annoy me, but here is one of the biggest. J1407b Super Saturn is not a planet with large rings. It is a brown dwarf with a protoplanetary disk, which is how planets form. Story 67. Touching baby birds will not cause the parents to abandon them. This is just nonsense. Story 68. I was admittedly browsing through a conservative forum the other day, and a thread came up where they were talking about how annoying it was that liberals keep repeating the Trump, fine people on both sides, quote as proof that Trump is a Nazi sympathizer. I knew he said that quote, so I went to just drop the exact quote in their thread. Here's the exact quote. Reporter: the neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest. Trump: excuse me. They didn't put themselves, and you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. In my opinion, we need to stop using this. If you look at this as a human being talking to another human being without nitpicking due to bias, it's clear to me that he's condemning the Nazis in his reference to bad people. But he's trying to make sure he indicates that the people there supporting the Republican beliefs weren't all Nazis. It's something any decent politician would try to make a distinction about. Trump is just a less careful wordsmith than most traditional politicians. It feels to me like repeating this one is operating in bad faith at this point. Story 69. Most of the time, when someone references the number of people in certain circumstances as hundreds or thousands, it is usually not accurate. Story 70. From what I tried, 30 or even 70 cherry pits were not close to being deadly. Story 71. The 2020 United States presidential election was stolen. I cannot believe I am still seeing people saying that. Story 72. The Myers-Briggs type indicator tests are not completely valid, truthful, or real, and they are as accurate as astrology. They have some use, but only to the extent that they align slightly with the Big Five personality traits. However, as a psychological tool, it fails completely, and the concepts about the associated cognitive functions are also nonsense. People either trust them completely or do not trust them at all, and neither stance is accurate. Story 73. You cannot touch a baby deer, or else its mother will abandon it. Story 74. Savings accounts do not generate worthwhile interest. Many people still think that Everywhere offers 0.1% because their longtime bank has that rate. Story 75. Every Game of Thrones fan keeps repeating that Joffrey's actor was abused by fans for his role, but the actor has clearly denied this, stating he has only had pleasant encounters with fans. Story 76. People drank beer because the water was unsafe. Walk through old cities and villages and see wells. That water was safe to drink and clean. Often it still is. People drank beer because they liked the taste. Story 77. There have been 46 presidents. Only 45 people have been president. Grover Cleveland served as the 22nd and 24th president. Story 78. J.D. Vance was involved with several couches. Story 79. The customer is always right. Hell no. The customer is always right in terms of taste. I think the original quote was that. Now, entitled people say it when they are being rude. Story 80. That Trump called neo-Nazis very fine people. Even Snopes has debunked that claim, yet Joe Biden and Kamala Harris both continue to include it in their political advertisements. Story 81. You only use one half of your brain, and that side is the same as your dominant hand. Story 82. Artificially sweetened soda is worse than regular soda. Artificial sweeteners are the most studied food ingredient ever. Occasionally, studies and news reports question their safety and suggest a correlation between artificial sweeteners and some characteristics of obese people. However, these studies do not control for obesity because it is not possible. While we cannot say scientifically that artificial sweeteners are completely safe, we can say with great confidence that they are much safer than consuming the sugar they are intended to replace. Story 83. Customers are always right. No, they are not. In fact, they are probably right about 15% of the time. Story 84. Most dinosaurs were scaly, lizard-like creatures. Edit. While this is partially true, it is not a fact that all species were scaly. Many of them likely had feathers with scales as the bottom layer of skin. They are much more bird-like than earlier researchers thought. Chickens are closely related to the Tyrannosaurus rex. Story 85. A private citizen cannot own a cannon, both when the Constitution was written and now. Story 86. The idea that people can be accurately classified as visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners, and that this matters at all for learning, wastes a great deal of faculty time, misdirects genuine efforts to personalize instruction, and has been thoroughly debunked by many prominent cognitive scientists. Story 87. That incorrect statistic about Greg Maddox and 3-0 counts is completely false. Story 88. Learning styles were popular at the end of the 1980s and early 1990s. It has been disproven, but some parents and teachers still believe it is a real phenomenon. Story 89. Politicians rule the world. It is well known that there is a secret society made up of the 5 wealthiest people in the world, called the Pentaverate, who run everything, including the newspapers. They meet 3 times a year at a secret location in Colorado called the Meadows. Story 90. There are more births during a full moon. Also, women living together tend to have their menstrual cycles synchronize. Story 91. The concept of alpha wolves, or alpha animals in general, is a misconception. The original study has been thoroughly debunked, even by its original authors. It turns out that they were family units with elders in a teaching relationship all along. Story 92. The Great Wall of China, which is about 10 meters wide, is not visible from space or the moon. Story 93. As a shark enthusiast, this is my time to shine. It is actually a proven myth that sharks are attracted to human blood. Sharks can distinguish between shark and fish blood, so cutting yourself at the beach will not attract a shark. Sharks do not generally hunt humans. If you see one and start swimming away, they might mistake you for a seal and take a nibble. However, once they take a bite, they will swim away. Traditional shark fin soup does not contain any medicinal or healing properties, as a shark's fins are made of cartilage. Sharks also have no bones. One more fact relating to dolphins. Sharks do not attack or eat dolphins as some people think. Sharks are actually afraid of dolphins because dolphins attack their gills, fins, and press on their underbelly, harming their internal organs. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.